Hello and welcome to Ignore All Previous Instructions. It's me, Pam Sally, and this week I have on Kelley, Kelley Robinson. Hello, Kelley.
Hi, Pam.
Would you please introduce yourself to the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I am currently working in developer relations at Twilio. I have been in this job for 7.5 years now. I know, right? I have a background that includes working as a software engineer, but also working in finance. And I think one of the things that I'm exploring right now is kind of what my job means, both in context of how developer relations has changed, but also what my job means in context of having a life outside of work too. So
Mm-hmm.
I've recently went down to part-time. I'm working 4 days a week now, and that's been great. And I'm trying to embrace doing more hobbies and having a life outside of work as well. And that's
Mm-hmm.
been really cool.
Yeah, I feel like you and I connected definitely in our careerist phases. And
Yes,
so, which
absolutely. I,
then there's
was
the,
on the
mm-hmm,
conference circuit for a while,
mm-hmm.
had all the status and the airline miles. And one of the benefits of COVID, if you can call it that, is that I got snapped out of that lifestyle very quickly.
Right. It just wasn't possible anymore.
Exactly.
So what is developer relations now? Is this still an open question?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the industry are trying to figure that out because when I got started in this job, and I think a lot of people at Twilio built the program around developer relations, there was this idea that you were going to be on the ground, going to a lot of conferences, speaking at a lot of events, traveling a lot. And that's just not the reality anymore. Both as like people have gone more virtual with different events and activations, but also I think budgets have gotten tighter. When I
Mm-hmm.
started working in tech in 2013, that was kind of the golden age of let's just throw
Mm-hmm.
money at all of these startups and see what sticks. And so you had all these people that were had these really big budgets for things like travel, for trying to do developer acquisition. And now we're looking at, more scalable opportunities, whether that's video content or written content or trying to do
Mm-hmm.
things from like the product led growth side of things as well. As I have my hand in a lot of those different areas right now. I work really closely with our authentication products that we work on. So I'm trying to make that process easier for developers. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that does not require that you speak at a bunch of conferences and
Yeah,
log, all these airline miles every year.
right. I think that the developer relations kind of past as it was an emergent role based on, at least I think of that I can kind of walk the story backwards and say that there were these, unfortunately, there's probably more of a there were these like learning developer communities. And then those communities were interested in finding content and educators to, connect with their audience. And then it became an opportunity for businesses to share their content, which then, walks down the path of, and by the way, now that you've learned about authentication, here's this interesting product. And
Yeah.
so I can see how that road got walked, and then it doesn't like that. The context that led to that solution doesn't exist now, per se. I would say, like, I know of one good meetup in Philadelphia that I'm loyal to, the Data Viz meetup, who one of the organizers will be on this podcast in a few weeks. Other than that, I mean, as someone who used to organize, like I used to
Yeah.
organize some of the stuff in Philly, and there's not stuff. There's stuff. There just used to be way more.
Yeah. And I think like part of that too is people got burned out on going to events too. And then I think you've
And
also had the
organizing
problem. Yeah,
as an
organizing
organizer,
is so much
yeah,
work.
so much work, and I was doing it. Yeah, you're doing it all for no money, which then leads to this,
Right.
industry of, well, why don't you get paid to do it?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean
And
that's like how I got into it, and I think how a lot of my peers got into it too, is I was speaking at conferences as like a
hmm
side gig, talking
right,
about, the engineering things that I was building, going and sharing those, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then yeah, you get the
scouted.
opportunity
Yeah.
to maybe get paid for that part of your work, and you're like, that sounds pretty cool. But
hmm
then all of a sudden, I think some of these conferences turn into events where you just have a bunch of like developer advocates speaking on a panel about stuff, and like not actually people that are building things. And so
It
the
starts to
further I
feel
got
too
removed
disconnected.
from,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like after a few years of like that, there was other things that I was learning more about that I, could speak on with authority, but it's not like I could go talk about the latest and greatest of the Scala programming language like I used to.
Yeah, I find this stuff interesting. So I've been exploring some other spaces. I'm looking at like in my I'm recording from my home studio today, and I have the badge from B-Sides Philly, which is so
Oh yeah.
B-Sides being the it's a security conference, which is
hmm
it's still like it gives I think it was interesting to me as well to go. The ticket was very affordable. They did a
hmm
fantastic job organizing it too. And then three, that as far as I could tell, most of the talks I saw were people who were practitioners.
Yeah.
And and that was part of it is that it was like talking, like listening to people who were doing things. And then they were, oh, let me share with my peers across
Yeah.
industries. And like it felt like old, it felt like the olden times.
Totally. And B-Sides is such a cool event.
hmm
There's B-Sides in lots of cities around the world too, which is another cool thing about it. But as far as I
hmm
know, it got its start from being the alternative, the B-side to
It's
the
true.
RSA conference in San Francisco. And so there's a
hmm
really big San Francisco B-Sides that does not have the same like corporate influence that the RSA conference has. And so you get to
Mm,
meet a lot of really cool people at those events.
yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think what we're seeing is people continuing to evolve and create things, and that's just what people will do. So and then as things in the last couple years, some of my favorite events like Strange Loop,
hmm
they've decided to stop producing their events, and
Yep.
I'm very happy for them. I think it's okay for things to end,
hmm
and that I think it's, dare I say, a good thing for everyone involved because it leaves a space that because also as an organizer, you get very tired of being taken for granted and being assumed, and so opening that space has that effect of, I hope, allowing people to fill that space. And that's,
Did you make it to the final Strange Loop?
no, I did not. Did you
I
go?
didn't either.
Oh, okay.
No, I'd
It's
been a
like, wait,
couple
it's
of
like if
times
you're
in the
asking me, we
past,
should probably
but
because we would have seen each other. It's like, did you go
that
and
would have been
choose
really
not to speak to each other? Um, no, no, no. Yeah.
yeah, I did. I was able to go to at least one of the past. What a cool event. But yeah, all good things must come to an end.
And that's a-okay,
Yeah.
I think. And sometimes things last a really long time too. And that's also really cool. So But so I know, so you mentioned that you do still consider yourself doing some developer relations,
hmm
but that you're more involved in like some other like business development, I'd say marketing is like the categories
Yeah.
that you're in. But how do you like where do you go and find developers now? Like if I walk through the story of how like my version of how developer relations came to exist as a role in
Yeah.
my story, it came to exist because there's these community events, and that's businesses had this problem, which is the problem that marketing solves, air quotes here.
hmm
Um, is how do you reach people that you're interested in sharing your information with? So where are the developers now, Kelly? Where'd they go?
I think
Where
the
have
ones
all
that
the
I'm
cowboys
trying to,
gone?
we need a soundtrack now. You
Yeah,
have license royalties for
to where have all
the
the
songs.
there's fair use. This an option.
Yeah, I think if you do a live performance of it, you always have.
Oh, true. There's
So we just
well,
need Pam to
is
start
it?
singing on the podcast.
Yeah, I haven't broken out my saxophone in a few months. It's you
Didn't know you
know,
played the saxophone.
I started a couple years ago.
That's very cool.
I used to be I was an oboist,
Okay.
and oboe, the weird looking clarinet type instrument,
Mhm.
uh for those unfamiliar, is has a lot of the same fingerings as a saxophone
Okay.
and similar range. And so I honestly was inspired to pick up a saxophone because I had so a bunch of my oboe books had saxophone in the name too. It was like oboe slash saxophone.
Nice.
And I was like, that's weird. Like they're in different keys. And alto sax is E flat key, I believe. And but then I picked up a saxophone and I was like, oh yeah, this would make sense. And it was not terribly, dare I say, difficult to pick up a saxophone. Oboe's known as a very finicky, it is a very type A instrument. Um, when you play oboe, you also make reeds generally if you
Okay.
become if you go down the path enough to be more of an oboe player. So it's like your music instrument also comes with crafts, like a very like intense and detailed craft of binding uh binding bamboo is
Oh,
binding cane
wow.
together and carving reeds.
I'm learning so
Anyway,
much.
so all to say, saxophone, it's a lot easier.
Uh, so I
It's a
think,
good time.
what I'm learning is that we need to find developers at concert halls,
There is a
orchestras.
strong intersection of musicians and software engineering.
Yeah.
There's a strong intersection. I think also because people, like to pay
I
the
mean, I think
bills.
there's just uh, like the smartest person that I went to elementary school with became like a professional saxophone player.
Hmm. Cool.
Like, really loved playing the saxophone. I hope he's doing well.
Right. Like we wish him the best. We send positive vibes in his direction.
Yeah, absolutely. But to answer your question about developer communities, I think
Yeah. Thank you. Good job grabbing the thread. Appreciate it.
it's we're looking more online now than we were
Mm-hmm.
going to in-person events.
Right.
And I think there's like two ways of doing that. You can do the kind of traditional outreach via online channels, whether that's Twitch streaming, YouTube, something like that, trying to create that like space online that might be more synchronous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think the other thing that I'm looking at is I feel like the hot new language that people are using these days is product led growth. And so trying to
Yeah. What
work
does that
with,
mean?
I think it's the idea that instead of doing kind of a traditional enterprise sales cycle, you make people use your product because of the quality of the product and the need for the product itself. And so I think of it as having a lot of overlap with self-service, like traditional growth marketing.
Okay.
But
I was like, this seems very easy to make fun of.
yeah,
That it's a business strategy is make thing people want use. People use thing. People tell other people use thing. People sell thing because want
I
to use
don't
thing.
I don't think you're that wrong though. And I am not the authority on product led growth, but I think the way that my work now intersects with that is I try to make it easy for people to use our products without ever having to talk to anyone. And I think there's a lot of benefits for that. One, developers don't want to talk to people all the time to sign up for things. And two, that makes it easier for people to just try things out before they do end up talking to someone, even if they do engage in a more like traditional sales cycle.
I think there's another facet of that too. I was just talking with someone the other day about that what we were actually talking about was how they've been getting a lot of more mean messages in their support systems. Like people are
Oof.
just being really mean. But then when we talked about it, I my point was most people don't like most people don't assume they're talking to a person. And in fact, that then this person who was telling me that was said, "Oh yeah, of course, our first layer is an AI chat, but then it bounces to a human." It's like, well, they were mean to an AI chat. And then the history of the chat goes to that human being, and so then
Yeah.
that's an unfortunate thing that I think the person writing those mean messages doesn't think about.
Yeah.
That you are like even when you get bounced to a person that maybe, but you're already in mean status, so like you're
Are
already in mean
you
mindset.
someone who is nice to AI chatbots? Like, do you say
No,
please and thank you?
that
I
was
don't know
why
why, but I
our
do.
conversation with him was that in fact I'm not rude to chats, but I will sometimes try to use anger words
Okay.
to skew the sentiment analysis, because when you have, at least what I understand, is that when you have a more angry or negative sentiment analysis, then your issue will get higher priority.
Wouldn't that depend on how the support system is designed, though?
It absolutely depends on the support system design. So it's making assumptions about it. That if it's they're using intercom or something like that, that it has a. You ever played the game Overcooked? I think that's the name. Have you played it? It's
I
so
have.
fun,
It
but it's
stresses me
so
out so
stressful.
much.
That's why I stopped. Is so it's that game where you pretend that you're a cook in the kitchen and you get orders, but some of the orders the customers get angrier faster. And so you
Hmm.
have to also look at the sentiment. And so based on what I learned from Overcooked, is being mean to AI chats is a smart idea because it makes them do things faster.
I
But
mean, is this what we want to be teaching the
well,
masses? Is that
and not that
being
I think
angry is the answer?
I think
What
that
did you
is
just drop?
like we do light editing on this podcast, Kelly. I'm not going to edit this out. I dropped my AirPod. It flew out of my ear for no reason. So I don't, yeah. Anyway, where was our thread?
We were
Before
talking about being
people are,
angry at AI chatbots.
but what was the thread before that?
Overcooked?
No, it was the thread after that, Kelly.
Oh no.
The ordering of our stack is off.
Yeah.
It was, oh man, might be gone. This will be really funny to listen to because like, wow, really, that's funny.
I think this is actually something that I have been thinking a lot about, though, is I've been trying to figure out like my own anxious responses to certain situations. And I feel like
Hmm.
when I don't get angry at things, I generally am less anxious. So I feel like there's a correlation for myself between anger and being anxious.
Interesting. I think of I think of anger as a to me it's more of a umbrella emotion that can hide a lot of different emotions.
Okay. Yeah.
To me it's a reaction that is then for me it's like I have a meditation practice, and that's where a lot of my relationship to anger has come from,
Uh-huh.
is that it's a signal, like it's smoke. So
Sure.
smoke means there's fire. And so, but then there's different kinds of, is it electrical fire? This is where the analogy falls apart. And so wood-based fire, but that it can be different kinds of things. So yeah, I guess because I was mentioning my friend talking about the support chat and the sentiment and using anger words, but not necessarily being angry, but using
Yeah.
anger words to try to push the system to go in the direction I want it to go in. I think
Yeah.
you asked a question within that context, which is, I think, why he brought it up, which I think is we're talking about is this a thing we want to train, air quotes, people to do? Is
Yeah.
being angry in support systems when there's human beings involved at some point. And also, like, I don't know, even if there's not, it's like how you I do believe that, which I think is kind of maybe this is where you were going, is that, you know, the patterns that you repeat are the patterns that you repeat.
Yeah,
So if you carry yourself in anger, even if it's in a AI chat, then that is still carrying yourself in anger.
right.
It's
And I'm
the
trying
this. Oh, go
to,
ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, like, I'm trying to basically give myself more space to like not have to resort to that. Because I think about the ways that this has like served me in the past of like publicly complaining on Twitter about something generally would like
Okay.
get you a faster
Yes.
response than
Yes, it
like
does. Or did. Yeah.
then
Does,
yeah,
did.
then I don't know, maybe it still does.
Hmm.
Um, but like how often do I need a fast response for something that I would otherwise complain on Twitter about? And I think that's where I'm trying to like basically reformat my life right now of like
Ooh.
I can like wait to deal with this and like take the slower route. And I think there's a
Mm.
lot of like um privilege in being able to like have that patience of like
Oh,
being able to have the space
absolutely.
for stuff.
Right. Because, whatever context someone's, I allocated X number of time to deal with this issue.
Yeah,
Uh-oh. And disruption of the dealing with it is a tax. And then it just goes back into the background queue of the million things that you're thinking about that aren't done.
exactly. Yeah,
And
exactly.
that the more that queue grows, it's a rough time.
Yeah. So trying to keep the queue small.
Yeah. So that's one of your strategies, keep the background queue of tasks small.
Yeah, try to limit the things
Mm-hmm.
that I need to care about.
Mm-hmm.
Try to give myself space to like also deal with things in a slow manner. I don't know if it's working, but I'm trying.
How do you think that something that brings up for me is the idea of, so you referenced, and you're thinking of some specific instances too of being uh need to deal with something, and that complaining on Twitter, like being negative, can generate closer to the response that you actually wanted, was just someone to pay attention to you.
Yeah,
And that, not, which that feeds into attention economy stuff too. But the thing I was going to ask was about, do you feel like you're allowed to be angry?
because who is doing the allowance here? And I think when I think about that question, which is a really good question, a lot of it comes back to like, do I allow myself to be angry? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
there's there's a lot of things I'm angry about. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I think I'm also just trying to like pick the things that I want to care about too, you know? Like
Yeah.
there's things that are like worth being angry about and then things that are not. And so
Mm-hmm.
something that I think like would have made me angry in the past of like having picked the wrong line at the grocery store and you're like
Mm-hmm.
behind some really slow people or something.
Right.
Like just not letting that make me angry.
Right. Is this worth
Whereas,
my energy budget?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. This is an experiment that I'm working on. It's not
Mm-hmm.
perfect, but
How would you say it's going if it's
I
an
would say
experiment?
pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've realized about myself is that yeah, like I think if I give myself more space and give myself space and time to like basically be more patient,
Mm.
then I can forgive a lot of things that might have otherwise stressed me out.
So yeah, for you, it seems like, so the permission to be more patient and
Yeah.
the interrogating urgency, and what does urgency mean and why is it urgent? I think that
Yeah.
that's probably a broad thing, that it is a privilege to be able to consider that. But if you can, that it's if you I was thinking about this as well with just I feel like I've been trained, me personally, I've been trained in the, online commerce
Hmm.
acquisition, treadmill of wanting, if I want a very specific thing, that I
Hmm.
can get it, and
Hmm.
I can get it pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
that then I am not Amazon free currently, but I have been Amazon free in the past in terms of being I don't buy anything from Amazon person.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really great line to hold, and I encourage that line. But when you hold that line, it really makes it obvious how much work you have to put in to try to find like I've gone to the corner hardware store and asked for things, and then they tell me to go to Home Depot, and I'm just it's like it's just such a misunderstanding of my intentions that is, I want my little cookie for trying to support my local business, and then they're straight up telling me to go to the giant corporation down the street. And
Yeah.
it's my reaction is like I'm thinking like no, like why don't we can't you like put in can it be like the general store in the old west where I request you to put in an order for me and then I'll come back in a week and it'll be here? Like that's okay. Like, I'm cool with that. And I wish, I started to think that the most radical thing you can do these days is open a grocery. That's
Wow. Like an
like,
old-fashioned grocery with a counter where you have to like go fetch things from people in the back.
yeah, that's like gonna be like the most radical thing you can do right now. And I mean,
That would be really cool.
there's things that and people are doing it and cool things like tool libraries and stuff like that.
Yeah, we have one of
Some of them.
those.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah.
In your little town.
In my little town.
We talked a little bit before the show that I was like, I only talk to city people, Kelley.
Yeah, and
How's the
now I'm
town?
in a little town. Well, I think this is part of like trying to slow down too, right? Is like
Mm.
for the last 15 years I've been living in these like major cities,
Right.
and I feel like it's really easy to get swept up in like the hustle culture of like
Yeah.
the tech vibes in San Francisco, or just the hustle culture of everything when you live in New York
In New
City.
York is yeah. Everything.
Yeah. And now I don't live in either of those places. I'm in upstate New York now. And it's very funny because, like, your environment does affect you, right? And I feel like
Mm.
I've, surrounded myself with people who have either like never lived in New York City, or who have also, there's a lot of people in this area that have left New York City,
Hmm.
but because, everyone has made a choice to live where we're living, I think there is like a similar vibe in terms of the type of people that are here. And like, it's the type of thing where, yeah, I don't live anywhere near a Target. And
Mm.
other people that have moved here have also been okay with that. And some people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, there's still a grocery store.
What?
Several, in fact. But I think that's one of the interesting things about it is like, yeah, you don't have all of the conveniences. Like, there's like 2 restaurants on DoorDash, and like, that's fine. There's other
It
ways we cope.
you work it out. And I'm sure
Yeah,
it's probably an adjustment period. Did you feel an adjustment period when you moved there?
I did. I
But I
think
guess
there was,
you moved there during the dark times, right?
it depends on what you consider the dark times. I moved in 2022. So,
Oh, that's like
yeah,
kind of
it was,
after. Yeah.
it was around the time that like most people decided they were done with COVID.
Yeah.
So it's hard for
No
me to
matter what
like,
happens, it's just like I'm personally done with this.
yeah, I feel like there was like a
uh,
shift that summer, and that was like
yes.
around the time that I moved. And so
Hmm.
it's like a different vibe of the place that I'm in, but I feel like overall, especially like the country was opening up in a way that like, and people, there was a lot more vaccination, and so people were just out and about and decided we
Hmm.
were done with it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's yeah, it's been an adjustment for a lot of reasons, but um, like having a house instead of an
Hmm.
apartment, not living in a city. And so like I think there's a lot of things that are different, and it's hard to like track down. Too many variables changed at once. This is not like a good
Mm.
experiment to determine
Mm. As our
what the
experiment
difference is.
counter goes up.
Yes.
Yes.
Life is an experiment.
Truly, truly is a series. I think that was you who told me that it's like a series. Life is a series of projects of indeterminate length.
Yeah, there's a writer that I really like, John Mooallem, who had a quote that was, "What is a human life if not a long succession of clumsily overlapping arbitrary projects?"
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I think about
Yes.
that all
It's
the
just
time.
what little projects do you want to do?
Yeah, and I think that's like kind of like what we're all figuring out all the time is like what gives our life meaning and how we approach
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think there's a lot of people that like find that in their jobs and like as, millennials, I feel like we were always raised to be like, oh, find meaning in your work.
In your
And then
career and your yeah.
that's backfired in a lot of ways. And so
It's
now we're
backfired,
all
but
trying to
why?
figure out why,
Yes.
what else there is.
Yes, the thing is I agree with you, but I also want to interrogate a little bit
Yeah.
of that, having worked in technology and the I guess I want to hear your version first. It's like where because you used to enjoy it. I guess you do still enjoy
I
it, you still
still
do it.
enjoy it. Yeah.
So yes. It
I
used to
just
be
like wouldn't call
fun.
my job my life purpose.
Sure, 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 sure. And the value that's the way that that attitude is rewarded in society of give like
You're saying that.
if your career is your life purpose, then it's like when we tell the stories about people and we
Mhm.
say and we associate like in someone's obituary, it almost 9 times out of 10 mentions their job or their
Yeah.
career. It's like it goes into your life story of like what did you, which I think is fair because what did you do? How did you spend your time? And it doesn't necessarily have to be your identity. I think you can be, a writer who, makes your capitalism money by, sweeping at the grocery store. Like that's cool. Like that makes you a writer, right? And then you make your
Yeah.
capitalism money somewhere, like where you put the relation. This is a thing I haven't figured out yet. It's that where you put the relationship between work and identity
Mhm.
and the way you pay your bills.
Yeah. I haven't figured that out either. So when you do, please let me know.
I'll let you know. Send a newsletter. And
Well, I mean, I think even as like someone that's like trying to like explore this actively and like trying to find that identity in other parts, like, you asked me who I
mhm.
am when we start this podcast, and I still start by talking about my job. And some
Yeah,
of that is context, right? Like
sure.
you and I met through like a professional
Hmm.
circle. And so I feel like there is the context there of like that affects
Yes.
our relationship. But I do think
Admittedly,
it's
this we are talking
interesting.
about technology, and you work in technology and have a relationship to
Absolutely.
it, and so
Yeah.
that's so. How do you think that your relationship to technology, in that you work in technology, and then here's I think the big question of so the when this is being recorded is the context in which we find ourselves of the not necessarily you know I mean, it is these few weeks of the,
Mhm.
January 2025. But it's also, I think, as the technology industry and landscape has changed. And, compared to, I guess for myself, it's, a recovering techno optimist. Um,
Yeah.
is that how do you feel you're managing that relationship?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's impossible to escape a lot of like the ways that technology is influencing our lives. And I think the AI stuff, however you want to categorize it, is here to stay, but it's trying to determine like how you're going to engage with it too is the thing that is always evolving. I don't
Hmm.
have the answer to this. I think I'm also not necessarily like a techno optimist these days, but I also think that there's like a lot of tools out there that do make our lives better, that make things easier. Um,
Hmm.
I think about like the stuff that I work on around like authentication, identity, and security. And like, there's a lot of benefits to having a more secure internet. If you take
Hmm.
it as an inevitability that we're going to have an
If we're
internet,
given if we have I mean, you don't write a mathematical proof without some assumptions. So we make some
Yes.
assumptions that if there is an internet and people want to talk to other entities on the internet,
Yes.
then whether those entities are, a computer talking to another computer, an
Hmm.
AI agent talking to another AI agent, or an AI agent talking to a human being talking to a human being, that identity is, I think, I mean, it's identity seems like one of the biggest spaces in computing right now. I think
Yeah.
it's just like, it's kind of always been, I feel like identity is one of those topics that, like, it can have a few big fat books on it, like,
Hmm.
of how did, like, in the past you could, I mean, and it's like kind of, it's like, is this okay, tell me I'm wrong. So in the past, and when Pam imagines the past, I think that before the internet, I could, move to another town, hand someone, $100 to rent my apartment because it's how much things cost, buy a house for $100, and I could have a name, an identity, a backstory that's completely made up.
Uh-huh.
And that in some ways that was somewhat some of like the cyber futurism that the 80s theorized, was this idea of being able to have many internet identities and
Hmm.
being different people. And then in the 2000, in this millennium, in the 2000s, and especially like Facebook's, policy of, like you need to
Hmm.
be a person, which is not actually true. You don't actually have to be a person. But they want you to at least pretend to be a person
Uh-huh.
and to be a consistent person. And it's not actually true. But that this idea, though, of there's people, and they think these are ideologies that are very, at least if we make these, we could tell a story where these are two very opposing ideologies of people who are like, do whatever, be whoever, be 20 people, be 100 people, be a million people on the internet. And people are like, no, one person, one internet identity. And you must
I
prove it with the
actually,
government. And we believe governments. And like, what does all this mean?
yeah, I mean, kind of a sidebar, but I finished a book last night called The Candy House. Have you read it?
No, but is it a big
That's
fat book about identity?
No, it's a
No.
novel by Jennifer
Oh,
Egan that kind of
okay.
explores this exact idea of like a future with a single identity and how that might make you more of a person and like have better connections with other people by like tying all of your experiences back to yourself and sharing that with other people versus there's a group of other people that are trying to elude this singular identity and basically not be connected to the grid so that they
Mm,
can escape that idea.
mm,
It's an interesting philosophy um, about like there's like some techno-futurism in that is curious. But I think it does tie back to like what is identity and like how do we prove it? And there's
mm-hmm,
lots of companies that are trying to figure that out.
mm-hmm.
Um, but I think one of the things that I've always liked about working in security too is that you can't escape the human side of it.
Right.
Like, I think when you work as a software engineer, sometimes there's code for the sake of code. You can
Mm-hmm.
write code and not necessarily
Business
like
logic.
yeah, you're writing business logic and maybe you're
Yes.
the user is like a front end client that is not actually like a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like with security, it's you're always thinking about the human element there. And I think that's always been really fascinating to me because it's not only about like how do you make something super securely encrypted, it's how do you make something usable for the humans that are involved in this process.
Mm. Do you think that philosophy is carried throughout the security field?
I actually think it is. Like
Mm.
there's different camps, right? Like I think there's the people like that are worried about like encryption algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, the people that are doing that side of things might not necessarily be considering like the usability of it. But in most practical security applications that I run into, and the people that I deal with and talk with all the time, like I
Mm-hmm.
think that the practicality and the human aspect of it definitely comes into consideration a lot.
Mm.
Often when you hear about these big hacks too, like it's not that somebody is like cracking an algorithm, it's that somebody was able to socially engineer some hole in the system to get
Yeah.
access to either a piece of information they needed to gain access to a system or just to bypass the system altogether, so
Mm-hmm.
that it always comes back to a human element in my mind.
Mm. Interesting. Do you think there's a security world where we have less hacks? Can we have less, Kelly? I feel like there's a lot. How are you working on that?
I think there's the security community has been trying to get rid of passwords for
Mm-hmm.
about 3 decades. Um,
And why are they
I
trying to get rid of passwords, Kelly, for everyone?
well, yeah, passwords are generally easy to guess or easy to steal or reused in certain ways that even if you're talking about um I think about a lot of this in terms of like consumer authentication, so you and me logging into like our Google accounts or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. There's an entire different industry of people that think in just about either security of how machines talk to each other or security of like enterprise companies and that kind of stuff. But I think especially when you talk about like how can we have less hacks, we think of how can fewer consumers get their accounts taken over, or how can
Mm.
they have a less of like their social security number stolen or something like that, right? And so in the context of consumer identity, people use easy to remember passwords because while you and me might use a password manager, a lot of people don't.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have something that's easy to remember. That means that it's either going to be a common password like 1234566 or the word password, or it's going to be something that's like easy to guess, right? Like your dog's name or like
Right. Or the name of
street
your
or something
street,
like,
or yeah.
yeah, your
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
kids or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Which is
that's
then
why, like,
socially engineered. Yeah.
yeah,
Or
so like
or
people,
public records. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and so that's why, like, companies started doing things around like two-factor authentications. Like, let's not just rely on something that you know. Let's also think about how you can verify your identity with like a one-time passcode to your phone or something like that. There's ways around that too, but it's like better than just using a password.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now the new thing is that the industry is trying to push passkeys
Mm-hmm.
as a security mechanism. And this is something that you've probably used already without even realizing it. Um, like Google has rolled out passkeys to all of their users. Microsoft has, a lot of big companies have rolled out passkeys. And this is a stronger authentication mechanism that is tied to a specific device. And
Mm-hmm.
so it can only be used on the device where the passkey is registered. It is also tied to a specific account so that it can't be as easily phished. And this provides a lot of very strong security practices and makes it a lot easier for people to have strong security while having that usability. Because like I mentioned, like you probably have used this without even realizing that you've used it. The mechanism of doing this now is pretty straightforward from like an end user perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think the downside of passkeys and why like we probably won't be able to get rid of passwords anytime soon is that what happens when someone loses a device? How do we deal with
Yep.
the account recovery side of that? There's always going to be this alternative authentication system and backup
Mm-hmm.
flow. And
And that is wherein, if that is compromised, then
yeah,
right. Which, yes, that is. Because it's, I feel like, so the pass key solves the issue of, okay, so I'm a hacker and I stole the user's table. I know I found a SQL injection to give me the user's table, and it prints out, I guess, I don't know how passkeys are stored. It's like, but then that is useless to me because I can't
Yeah.
go and,
You would only
type
have
in.
access to like the public keys.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be able to then go and do my hacker thing, and I would be foiled. And
Yes.
huzzah. But if I had enough information from that table to call customer support and say, hey, my name is John and I lost my password, I need you to let me in.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, John, tell me a few things that you found from your users table. And then they let me
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a perfect system, but
in. Mm-hmm.
it's progress in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting things. It's in ways we've made things a lot easier to steal. By moving things into digital space, that there's I don't think this is too different from I think there's a relationship between this and people being mean to AI chats, in that the assumption, well, it's the distance between person to person,
Yeah.
is that, what is the social contract? I mean, I know why I don't run around stealing from people is because I think it's mean and I don't want it to happen. And so I don't. It's not that complicated. But then, if someone somewhere else doesn't have that same feeling and they can live in, another city, another town, another country, and then I'm just a number on the internet and I'm not a person.
Exactly.
And so who cares if, the harm that you cause, and how do we rectify that harm? Like they're, distanced from that. Um,
Yeah.
there's some ideas in there I've been thinking about, been thinking about justice.
So are
That's
you gonna
thoughts I've been thinking about.
delete all of your online accounts and like only are you gonna be like are you gonna become unbanked so that you can
See, the
not
thing
have
is that
your
unbanked is also a Web3 thing.
oh no.
So, which I don't know enough about yet, to speak wisely on, but there are that also unbanked somehow also means being so online.
Oh, interesting.
You're, as far as I understand, maybe I could be completely wrong. I'll, in a few weeks, I'll also have someone to talk about, more blockchain tech. And so, but yeah, so being out of the fiat based banking
Okay.
system.
There you
So it can mean most things. But yeah, alas, it's really difficult to live a life offline now.
go.
Even
It really is.
even de even taking your identity out of all Google products. That's actually something that my a previous guest, Sarah Withy, she did that process, and it took her about a year to get all of her stuff out of Google, in
That's
terms of
wild.
just so many. I told her she needs to write a book on it, and just like a little, for real. It's like if it took
Yeah.
you, like, and it's not. I mean, she's brilliant, so it's not like she's not smart. It's like, because it just is. There's so many dependencies and so many. How do you do this thing that society wants you to do, like, and work wants you to do,
Hmm.
and wants you to have a Google account to do it?
Yeah.
And that is, that's a problem, is not quite the word I want to use, but the puzzle that I don't know that I hear enough people thinking about, of
I mean,
the
I think
right to
even just
not be
my
in a system.
yeah, like even my example of like accounts that you might log into, like I just assume that people have Google accounts.
Right. But you should have the right not to, and still
Yeah.
be able to interact with the online world, which
Yeah.
I think there's identity in Web3 is like one of the topics in there. And not just Web3, but other identity things. I feel like there's some good stuff that so the Hackers on Planet Earth conference published all of their archive. Like every
Okay.
Hackers on Planet Earth conference,
Yeah.
like they publish all their videos, and I've been meaning to, just like put one on the background or something every so often, just because there's a lot of interesting and
I mean,
weird
they've been
stuff.
going for a long time though. That's probably a
It's a
lot
lot
of
of
archive to
stuff. There's
make
a
your
lot
way
of
through.
content. Yeah, but there was I when I tuned into the stream last summer, there was someone talking about identity. It sounded that talk, I wish them the best. It did sound a lot like the standards, N+1 problem. I shall propose a new standard. Now we will have N+1 standards.
Yes.
However, I do think identity, there's the right to be forgotten that we, have established, at least in Europe. But, you know, it's not like a right, but like, how do we make it so that you can have more choice in how you interact and say, like, I don't want Google to have any information on me. I don't want Google to store information on me because I talk to you either.
Yeah.
That it's like, why do you get to have you store information? Like, and there's that, mysterious little Facebook form that I fill out every so often there's a like it's
Be
a right to be
forgotten. Yeah.
forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a weird little corner of their website to say, hey, I know that you know who I am, but you're not allowed to
Yeah. And that you have to like, I mean, this is
disclose
the same
yourself
thing with
to not
there's
be them.
services. Yeah, there's services for like data deletion that you can like opt out, like you can pay somebody to opt you out of all of these like data mining services. But in order to do that, you have to give them a bunch of your information. And it's kind of like this
Mm,
funny process of being like, okay, so I'm giving someone my
mm.
home address so that they can request that another service deletes my home address.
Yes, correct. so they can do the thing where, go and pretend to be John and ask,
Yeah.
you to let me into my account, but in that case, delete the
But yeah,
data.
I think it is funny because I think in like there's definitely like lots of people that believe in like the privacy as good and like the right to be forgotten and like there's a reason that the European Union has enacted these laws. But
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's interesting because a lot of these tech companies would like us to believe that like data is good and like more data is good and
Mm-hmm.
having, that kind of thing is the net positive because of things like personalization. But,
It's
having
like,
worked
nah.
in ad tech in a previous life,
Yeah.
oof,
Anyone who knows anything about ads, yeah, I avoided like the plague as much as I could.
yeah, it was a
I
really
think it's one
interesting
of the
place
top
to learn
evils
some
in the world.
things. Yeah, it was a really interesting place to learn some
Mm-hmm.
things about data engineering, and then I got
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah. I want to amend my earlier, I don't like, you first and most radical thing you could do now is be a grocer, or open a tool library. Second, what you reminded me of is to be a librarian. Is that I think because I think we are, confronting lately I happen to, because I previously was an admin, I still have admin status on a community Slack, and there was a notice that they're going to delete, warning, if you don't, pay us money, which we won't. If you don't pay us, uh, 5.4 million messages and files greater than a year in age will be deleted. And my response is, don't threaten me with a good time. Like, can we shorten that window? Like, ephemeral data is a feature to me now. Like
Yeah,
versus, the anything. So back to Google is like I still won't give up my Gmail because being able to search my archive of Gmail data
yeah.
for what did I say 5 years ago is still very valuable to me.
Hmm.
Um,
I
and
mean, that
so
was
as
one of the reasons it like took me so long to like delete my Twitter account, as I was like, oh, there's like a lot of stuff in there. And I guess I still haven't even deleted my Twitter account, but I deleted all of my tweets.
I delete the
I'm just,
tweets, yeah,
yeah, I'm
I
just
don't
parking the username for now. But like,
I
it's one of
I
those
keep my
things where,
username and I started using it again a little bit
yeah,
recently.
yeah, I remember you saying that in a previous episode. And
Mm-hmm. It's like
like,
because I don't know, I'll take up space.
yeah, you don't want them to win. And I like that.
It's like just like arbitrarily take up space.
Well, it's like my partner, loves to put out the American flag on like days where you would put out an American flag. And I feel like that's one of those things that like
You mean
has like,
so I feel so dumb. Outside in the real world?
yeah, like
Okay. Like a
on our
flagpole.
house. Yeah, we have like a
Okay.
flagpole.
Did
But like I
you
feel like the American flag is like taken on meaning as like a right wing thing, and like it
It's
doesn't
very
need to.
unfortunate. Yeah, you're also a person in this country who can it's nice to have it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I like that. Yeah,
Like
that you're like just
reclaiming the
right.
space for yourself and your
Which is it
intentions.
seems so it's like why even? And in the pre-show we talked a little about on being online and onlineness.
Yeah.
And when you said that about the flag, one of the things I think about onlineness as well is I remind myself that being extremely online is not necessarily the norm.
Yeah.
Or
Well, I feel like
the being very online is like a flavor that I don't even mean. Like it's like people who are very online, but they're like on TikTok and upset about TikTok. And like I just don't even like I never did. I feel like you and I were in the same online spaces when TikTok came out
yeah.
and we were like, oh my God, that is such a security risk. Don't do it. And so I just simply never did. Um, and just completely skipped that boat. So
So you never had to be sad about it getting taken down.
yeah, I found out about it, which I think it's back. I I found out
Is
about it getting
it? I
taken.
mean, I
Yeah, we're
yeah,
out of the loop here. So,
we
but I
don't
found
even
out about it. It
know.
did go down. It did go down. And so when it did go
Yes, I know it
down,
did go down.
I heard about it from someone who I was traveling and it was someone who was very they're like, wow, and it went down. And me and my partner were like, what are you like what is like I was very curious. I actually asked a lot of questions because this is, someone who is like very, very online in a different way than I
Okay.
think of being very online. Or like how like I identified as previously very
Yeah.
online, recovering extremely online. Um,
Yeah, I definitely went through like a phase of many years where I did a lot of like sharing about my life on the internet, and
yeah, I think
I don't do
it's,
that as much anymore.
yeah, at least for me, sometimes that brings up a feeling of shame or feelings of like, why did I do that? Why did I allow myself to be vulnerable online? And then I try to explain to myself that, being vulnerable with people online was a very nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I don't I totally get like the instinct there. And it's not that I don't have that, but I think like I've also like recognized all the ways that it like did help me at the time. And like I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
built like a community. Like you and I probably wouldn't know each other if it wasn't
Right.
for a lot of these spaces. And
Our
so
onlineitude. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so like I think there's a lot of value in that. And like I've like some of like when I moved to the town I'm in now, like I found events in the real world because of online spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's like value in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think like being vulnerable in any space is a way to like make connection, and that's like generally a net positive. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I decided that I didn't need to do that right now.
Right now is not. I also think that in the current era, for the last couple of years, I still have been interacting in some social media spaces, and that if I don't personally know the person and I know
Mhm.
that they have an account, I do not assume it is a real person.
Interesting.
So my baseless, it's not, I don't want to say I quite assume that they're a bot. It's more that I put it in my I don't know box.
That's
So
really
that
fascinating and something.
until proven through I have spoken to this person or I have spoken to a person who has said that they know that person and knows they're a real person,
Yeah,
then I do not know that that person is a person.
I think that's really smart. Not something I've been thinking about because I think I mostly have like gotten out of online spaces. Like it was like around,
The online commons. Like,
Yeah, like
so
the
like
online
online comments
comments.
like Twitter's, Instagram, like these are in like the online
Yeah,
comments where non like versus a invite only, or I get the
right.
invite to the Discord server because I know somebody who sent me an invite to the Discord server.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
But like the Twitters, the Instagrams, those types of social media, I feel like I left those spaces like around the same time that LLMs were gaining popularity in a way
mm,
that like would make those bots a lot more realistic.
yes.
And so that's like a really interesting point because I haven't had that like experience of like having to think about that recently.
Yeah. The number there's non-zero number of times where I point out to someone that the person that they're sharing is not a real person. Like they're when I point, I resist. Most of the times I resist. There are times when I don't resist, and I like it falls in the category of like, do I need to do something about this? Most of the time the answer is
Yeah.
no. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's a message of a certain like quality or caliber that drives me to say, like, or especially like sharing other people's art. This is just one that's like just like as a
Yeah.
artist is like you're sharing other people's art by someone who's not the artist and not attributing them. And I just
Yeah.
that's a line for me that's like, hey, I'm gonna let you know that you're doing that because I don't like knowing you as a person who I know the person who's sharing it. I would think
Yeah.
that that would not fall in line with your ethics. And
Right.
generally, they've not necessarily always taken it down, but they'll be like, thanks for letting me know. It's like, I'm like,
Totally.
well, my ethics are the line of like, hey, I see something that looks like not cool to me. Perhaps you would like to not do that.
Or like the Twitter bots that are like trying to pose as like anti-union Amazon workers. Those are always funny to see. It's
Those are very
like
funny. Why would
Nancy
I?
Amazon 456. Like,
Yeah,
why do I need a union? Amazon
there.
pays my bills.
Did you? I don't think I talked about this in the podcast. Is the I'm forgetting her name, but the actress who had a smear campaign done against
Like
her, like for
Blake
This Is
Lively.
Us, Blake Lively.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it was like a firm that was hired to ruin her reputation, and it's like
Yeah.
very, it's like but it goes like, of course that happens.
Yeah.
It's just business. It's someone wanted something to happen, and so they found someone to pay to do it, and someone was willing to take that gig, and it pays very well because it's not nice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't pretend to have like perfect morals, but I would like to think that I wouldn't take that gig.
Yeah, but this ethics.
I did you ever watch The Good Place?
Yes, I
The
I love that movie. Love that show. Strong
it's
recommend.
so lovely. But the creator Michael Schur wrote
Hmm.
a
Yes,
pop sci book on ethics as a
love
follow up
that
to the
book.
show.
Yes,
Yes. What's it called? Do you remember? Why can I
how to
know?
be perfect.
How to Be Perfect. Yes.
Yes,
It's
I
a
listened.
very great.
It's not a very long audiobook.
Yeah,
It's
I did
only a
it as an
few
audiobook
hours.
too.
Yeah, and
Uh,
because he reads it, and there's like
yes.
I listened because it said that there would be some actors from the show, and I was like, oh, that sounds cute. Not
Yeah.
that many, as you know, because you listened to it,
Right.
um, but
But
it
anyway,
was
great
cute.
book.
Yeah.
And it is funny though, because I feel like anytime you read like a philosophy book, which I haven't done since like college besides that one, but
Hmm.
it's, like there is no answer. There is not an answer to how to be perfect. I feel like the only example that he gives in the book of like the universally accepted thing that makes you a good person is returning the grocery cart after you go shopping, which people do not do.
Also, I you know, because if you don't, then you're a job creator.
Is that what people think?
I mean, that's what I would say. That's I didn't feel like it. I'm being a job creator. That job can't get taken by AI. So by leaving that groceries cart out, I'm securing a job.
I don't know if I'm gonna go that far, but I like the creativity. Well, so what I'm learning about Pam in this episode, she's mean to AI chatbots. She doesn't return the grocery cart.
Not I like. Well, I go to Aldi, so I get my quarterback. So
That's true, yes. This is the German efficiency. They
yes,
have
or
the right
someone else in the park,
incentives.
or someone else in the grocery
Yeah,
parking lot. We exchange a quarter for this cart. We
exactly.
have a little exchange. So you be not consistently mean to AI chats, but the ways I've attempted to be mean have been kind of. Sometimes I've tried like saying just like "grr," like how do I trigger the sentiment analysis? Like when it gives me a like you have 18 minutes before you can talk to an agent. I'm like, let's adjust that number.
I might
This
try
text
this
field's
as
still
like because
open.
I'm
Why
just
didn't you
like
close it? You gave me a time limit, but didn't close the text field. So
somehow like
that
just
means I
like
could be
typing
typing.
"grr" in a message is
Rar.
very funny to me. It does not read as actually angry, so
doesn't trigger the sentiment analysis. It's
to
probably just
me,
like
but
you're just seem like
I'm
a
not a
nice
sentiment
grumpy
analysis
person.
AI, but
Yeah. Yeah.
is reading your intentions.
Mm-hmm. So, oh, well, Kelly, it's been great talking to you. We'll just pick a time to wrap up. So it's like, so do you have, so you're not really on the open social medias, or are you anywhere? If people want to stay in touch, if people want to like, do you have anything you want to let people know about? Uh, you know,
You can find most of my writing these days on the Twilio blog. It's
there you
about
go.
the only place that you're going to find me online right now.
A rare
Um,
appearance by Kelly.
yeah, I don't know. If you're in the Hudson Valley looking to make friends, hit me up.
Mm-hmm. By commenting on the Twilio blog. Is that
Yeah, I don't know. If they know you, then they can
they
get in touch
can
with
message
you to get in
me
touch
and
with
then
me. I'm
love it.
looking for IRL relationships.
Mm-hmm. Getting involved in communities.
Yes.
Well, thank you
Is that
so
like the
much.
worst way to try to promote my own work?
No, I think it's well, and perhaps I think that I think in the past as well, I think in the career, like this kind of goes back to the careerism stuff, is like some of the brain poison I consumed was, personal branding and
Mm,
things like that, is that I always, which is rooted in some realities that is like,
totally.
you want to, in a short amount of time, communicate some sort of information and give people like, some sort of path to like, so if there's, nothing particular that you're like, oh, please go buy this book, please, like that's fine.
Yeah.
Like doesn't mean it'll always be this way. Right now, like it's like, ignore all previous instructions of the podcast.
Great.
Where I talk to interesting people and we talk about tech stuff and apparently usually get into some sort of realm of philosophy. And and yeah, so ignore previous instructions. We're on the YouTube at Tech Cult Podcast. And also on Patreon at Tech Cult Podcast if you're interested in that vein. There is a not really updated often Instagram, and thank God people are leaving Instagram, I guess. So like maybe you can just continue to be in. There actually is a TikTok account that I made for this
Whoa.
podcast. But then when they were like, oh yeah, they're gonna shut down TikTok, I was like, oh great, now I don't have to think about if I want to post to that. I can just like go back to never logging into TikTok or having a TikTok account. And so, but there's a Blue Sky account at
Nice.
techcultpodcast.bsky. And so thanks so much for coming on, Kelly. It's great talking to you.
Thank you for having me.